At Granger, we're for the ones who pay attention to every little detail. The ones who fuss, tinker, and sweat the small stuff. Because you know the tiniest thing can make the biggest difference when it comes to keeping business moving. We get it. We're the same way. Offering access to product experts to help you quickly and easily find what you need. So whatever your industry, you know you're always getting professional-grade products. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome back to Jester Section Hiker, the premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where you will hear stories about everyday people who, in addition to their everyday lives, make the commitment to hike long-distance trails where every section is a new beginning. Today's guest reached out to me when he first saw our initial Facebook post about the podcast and stated he would love to be on the show. He has had an astonishing career as a multiple tour combat veteran, spent over 20 years in the Army, and now happily works for MIT as a leadership instructor and program manager. On any given weekend, you can find our guest hiking in the White Mountains of New Hampshire and working on his section hike of the Appalachian Trail. You can also find our guest on Facebook and Instagram and follow along as he pursues his section hiking. Welcome to the podcast, Leo McGonagle. And Leo, thank you for your service.
Julie, I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on as a guest as part of this wonderful project you're doing. I'm happy to be a small part of it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Leo, we're going to go ahead and get started.
Let's go for it.
I love this first question I'm going to ask you. So for those of you that are familiar with the first 50 or so miles of the Appalachian Trail in Georgia, you know that you might encounter a particular group of individuals training out near or on the Appalachian Trail. If you were out on the trail in 1989, you may have seen Leo, or he may have seen you. Leo, tell us about your training and your first introduction to the AT outside of Dahlonega, Georgia.
Well, that's interesting. I did spend some time in Dahlonega, and long before I ever entertained the thought of section hiking. As a very young Army lieutenant, I went through what the Army calls Ranger School. And for those that don't know, Ranger School is one of the nation's, it's the Army's most elite leadership training crucible. It's one of the nation's most elite leadership training schools. Very taxing, very demanding. It's an 8-week school. It happens all over the country. 2 weeks at Fort Benning, 2 weeks up in Dahlonega, Georgia, and then it moves off into the swamps of Florida and then out into the desert. And so as a young lieutenant, I found myself in the mountain training phase at Ranger School. And in Ranger School, essentially, they get candidates cold, tired, and hungry, and then they push you. And then you see how far you can push yourself, how far you can push others, and you're training nearly continuously, having very little sleep and getting pretty hungry. And so I just want to personally apologize to any hikers I might have encountered out there on behalf of all my brothers that were out there, and brothers, now there are sisters, now there are women in Ranger School as well. But we probably, if we encountered you, we probably begged you for food and maybe tried to search your backpack because we were hungry Rangers. But yes, it was a little bit different then. The pack sizes were a little heavier. I was carrying a pack roughly about 3/4 of my own weight, and sometimes with either a rifle or a machine gun.
Wow.
And so I did have some experience on the trail back then. It was a little different than my hiking escapades that would follow later.
Yeah, I would say it's totally different. And when I first hiked in Georgia, I had no clue that the Ranger School was right there. And about 3 a.m, we started hearing helicopters and craziness. And I mean, I thought literally the end of time was coming. And then somebody said, "Oh no, that's the Army Rangers. Don't worry about it." So Leo, I was not out there in 1989, but I certainly encountered some training out there. So once you moved on from that, and go ahead.
What you heard was probably a night raid or a night ambush of nighttime training. And then the Rangers probably retreated to the barracks and later were awarded with some blueberry pancakes, which are famous there in Dahlonega. But I did move on from there. I have not so fond memories of that time, but I'm proud to have gone through and completed the school.
Well, wow. I mean, that is a huge accomplishment, to say the least, from someone who knows absolutely nothing about that. I do know that it's a huge accomplishment. So as we move forward, so to speak, with your section hiking, you actually kind of started out completing this or working on the New Hampshire 48 4,000 foot challenge. I hope I said that right. Explain to the listeners what that is and how that fueled you to pursue your section hiking of the AT.
So I had decided to transition from service. I got out of the Army in around 2008. Did very little. I did a lot of hiking. You would call it tactical hiking. You know, I did a lot of Army training, so didn't have an interest in hiking recreationally until I got out. Settled back in the Boston area, which is where I'm from, and the listeners can probably tell from my heinous Boston accent.
I wasn't going to say anything, but hey.
You're on the other end of that.
Make fun of me too, so there you go.
I know what side of the Mason-Dixon line you're on as well. But anyway, to answer your question, New Hampshire has 48 peaks above 4,000 feet, up to and including Mount Washington, which is on the AT, and of course it's the highest peak in the Northeast. And so people peak bag, you know, they try to go out and they hike to the summit of all 48 of those peaks. Some people do it over several years. Some people do it multiple days, but it takes them some period of time to do that. And my AT section hiking buddy had already been out there and had begun to peak bag with somebody else, with another friend of his who got hurt. And then one April 2016, he said, "Hey, you know, why don't you come out hiking with me? I'm peak bagging the 48. And you can help me bag a few peaks." I'm like, okay, that's exercise, hiking, let's go out and get after it. So I began to peak bag with him. He had 24 of the 48 done at the time.
Okay.
And I was starting from scratch with no goal of really completing many more than, that many at the time.
Okay. And then he's your hiking buddy, Doug Baker, that actually began officially section hiking the AT with you. So let's get into that a little bit. So where was that first section hike, and tell us how that trip went?
First section hike was our home state of Massachusetts. So we spent a lot of time hiking together, peak bagging the 48, which I eventually ended up finishing. But we decided to hike our home state first. We did it in August of 2016. We drove out to Western Mass. We spotted one car up near the Massachusetts-Vermont border. Then we drove down to Connecticut, parked another one, and we had planned the hike, and we just started walking. And so 2016 was our first state. It was planned at about 85, 90 miles, and we just got out and got after it.
Nice. And what would you say, did you learn anything in particular from that trip? Did you start changing your gear? Did you say, I love this is working? Like, what are some memories from that particular section?
I would have to say that 2016 was by far my most memorable section because it was my first foray into section hiking. Met a lot of section hikers out there, met a lot of through hikers out there. Massachusetts had a terrible drought that summer. It didn't rain nearly all summer. It poured on us the very first night on the trail.
Well, of course it did.
our first shelter right over the Connecticut border. It poured on us all night long. And, so we were wet and came down with a couple of blisters. From my time in Ranger School, I'm a light fighter. I like to travel light and I like to travel fast.
Well, Leo, light to you after Ranger School with a 145-pound pack or whatever you had, light to you is about 40 pounds.
Yeah, I was carrying a pretty low base weight, but we had to adjust a little bit. And, but we learned just the way of the trail. We learned to interact with the other through hikers and the other section hikers. We learned sort of the culture of the trail. And we just had a great time. We really just enjoyed it. We weren't in a big hurry. And we were Nobo at that time, and I think like you, I know you go Nobo, you go Sobo. For the most part, our section hikes have been Nobo, and we were Nobo that year. And at that time of year, there were many, many through hikers on the trail. And those through hikers, if they had made it to Massachusetts, there's a good chance that they were going to make it all the way. So we got to meet and spend a lot of time with them, a different cast of characters. So it was good for us.
Nice, nice. And I think this next statement that you made to me in our initial conversation came from that trip. You said that hiking set your soul on fire. Now, to me, that's an extremely powerful statement. So go into more details for us, what that means to you.
It really did for me. I'm a multiple combat tour veteran, and on behalf of all the others like me out there, and I thank them for their service. In over 20 years of service and multiple deployments, you accumulate all kinds of physical pain, bumps and bruises, and I had like chronic gluteal pain, hamstring pain, hip pain, joint pain, low back pain, and so. Service members can suffer physical and mental wounds, and I think hiking helped me deal with that, and a lot of it just melt away. It seemed like the more I hiked, the more that my pain went away, and it just sort of set me free. And I'd just be looking, everyone would say, "Hey, what's your favorite trail?" And I'd be like, "It's the next trail. When's the next hike? When are we getting out to do that?"
Right.
And so I think like everybody else, I caught the bug, just after the 48 and then getting a taste of the AT and section hiking. That was just it. I was all in.
And that is great. And yes, I will say that I have heard from several veterans that I've actually met out on the trail that, not only hiking the Appalachian Trail, but getting outdoors and setting a new goal and having something different in your life after you've come back from a tour or been in the military for several years has been very healing. So I think it's very powerful. Not only are you speaking about this, and that others out there can hear this as well. So thank you very much for that.
I can't emphasize how much service members are goal oriented. And so, if you put in front of a veteran a new goal or a new challenge or a new task, they're going to take that on head on. And so, okay, hey, the 48, yep, let's do that. And I finished them all, the New Hampshire 48 in 7, and I did them all with my dog, by the way. I have a fantastic trail dog. Oh. She's earned her Appalachian Mountain Club 4,000 footer patch, trail dog Bella, and I'll send you a picture of her.
Nice. Send me a picture of her. I want Bella in the show notes for sure.
I will. But you give a veteran a goal, and he or she is going to go out there and attack that with vigor. And section hiking is a journey with no summit. It's just, the goal is, hey, let's just keep going. Let's keep doing this. And so I think that it's a great area for veterans to sort of pursue, those that are able to do it.
Nice. So now your soul is set on fire, and now it's the summer of 2017, and you took on the goal and section hiked the state of Vermont. So talk to us about how you enjoyed the interaction in Vermont with all the through hikers, and a little more deep in what that means to you to have that social interaction with others on the trail.
So we did. We picked up right where we left off. We spotted a car right back in Massachusetts, south of Vermont. Our goal was the whole state, which was about 150 miles, and we did end in Hanover. And we no-boat again, and we did it in August. So we were on the trail, and we came upon. It's interesting, and I'm so glad you're doing this podcast, because our most memorable interactions were with through hikers. There were certainly section hikers that we met and engaged with, and then you'd find the weekend warriors as well that were out there on the weekends. But we really enjoyed it. Vermont was a fantastic state, and then just the people you'd meet every night in a shelter along the way. And there's people from as everybody here knows, people from all different walks of life. Young kids that are taking the summer off from college, or people that are finding themselves after college and taking a gap year to figure out what they're going to do next. And then there's older people that are retired and out there on the trail because they've always wanted to do that. There's people that are in between jobs or post-divorce. there's new discussions, there's new people, there's a new story almost all the time, and there's always something you can learn, and the interactions were great. And sometimes it would be over multiple days because you'd see same people at shelters, or sometimes it would just be for a night because you'd bump into a Sobo or something like that, or just some people out there for the weekend. And so I derive great value and benefit from that. And then my hiking buddy, Doug Baker, we were childhood friends. We grew up together. And when I joined the Army, I was away for 20 some odd years. And so I didn't get to see him until I came back. And just really reconnecting with him along the trail, and all those days as well. So I really, really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the state of Vermont. We like to, if we do a section hike for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, we'll usually take one night in a trail town, just sort of hang out, drink some beer, and we'll just split the cost of a hotel room. We did at the Long Trail Inn at the base of Killington. It's a fantastic hiker's haven. For anyone that's not been there, I would recommend that you stop in there. But Vermont was a good state for us, and it was a good introduction to the whites.
Nice. Let me ask you this, Leo. When you started section hiking the Appalachian Trail, did you think that you would have such of this anticipation for the social interaction, or did it kind of surprise you, the community of people on the Appalachian Trail?
I had no idea what to expect in 2016, which is why it was my most memorable year. And the people I remember most are from that year. But no, it was eye-opening for me because it's, I know the brotherhood of those in service, and there's certainly a brother and sisterhood of those on the trail as well, irrespective of what type of hiker you are. This the whole hiker community and just the whole outdoor scene. And it's a well-connected community of a very diverse group of people.
And for me, it's what keeps drawing me back to the Appalachian Trail is the community and the people. So it's in most people, I would say almost 10 out of 10 that spend any time whatsoever on the Appalachian Trail will tell you at the end of the day, if they had to answer 5 questions, one of those 5 is going to be about the people and the community and the trail angels and things like that. So I totally agree. So Leo, as you progress forward, let's move into 2018. And in 2018, you're laughing. You actually section hiked Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. But something happened during that time that was actually unexpected. So explain to us what that was and how you dealt with it.
Yeah, our plan was to hike from the Pennsylvania, New Jersey border all the way to the Mass Connecticut border. That was longer than the year before. That was 220 miles. And we took 2 buses, from Boston, 2 buses later, and about a half-mile walk, we were at the trailhead at the Delaware Water Gap there. And so it was a massive heat wave when we started that hike up in New Jersey. It was in the high 90s. And, so I thought I was chugging along with my buddy, for a couple of days, and it was really, really hot. I felt like I was starting to get a little dehydrated, which is natural, I think, but
oh yeah, especially when it's that warm in those lower elevation states, I would say that's pretty common.
It was warm, and then we got to New York, and New York is a little bit sneaky because there's so many pointless ups and downs in New York. There's a lot, and I know parts of New York fairly well because I was stationed at West Point at the military academy. But for about 3-4 days into the section hike, and I'm a pretty aggressive hiker. I like to go light and I like to go fast. And I'll talk about later. You're going to ask me about what's a mistake you've learned from it. So I'll circle back around to this.
Okay.
But I felt like I just felt like I had lost my mojo a little bit. I didn't feel like I have the right energy. I wasn't feeling myself. And then we lumbered up to the top of Bear Mountain in New York. And oh my heavens, what a sight. How awesome is it? Right along the trail, you find a Gatorade. It's 90 degrees and there's a Gatorade machine right along the trail.
I know. I was throwing dollars in that machine left and right.
I was throwing dollars in it like crazy. I wasn't quite feeling right. And we had planned a day. We had planned 1 zero day. We usually don't zero on the trail at all, but we had mailed a resupply package to ourselves at the Fort Montgomery post office, which is just outside of West Point, New York. I know the area well. I was stationed there. And we went out to dinner and I had a beer and I just wasn't feeling myself. And I was, at night, I had been like getting the shivers in my tent.
Oh, that's not good.
And so night in the hotel, same thing. I had the shivers and I woke up the next day and I told my friend, I said, hey, I'm just not feeling right. I think I'm going to need to zero again, and hotels were expensive. I said, I'll pay for the room. I just don't feel right. And let's see how I feel tomorrow. And by the next day I was worse. I was urinating orange. And I'm a soldier. I know that your urine gets dark when you get dehydrated, but like it looked like I had spilled orange Gatorade on the side of the toilet seat, and so
yeah, that's got to be a whole nother thing, Leo.
the next day I just knew something wasn't right. And I had a friend who she was very nice. I mean, and this is another section hiker who's hiked as much of the trail as I have or more. Graciously, she drove all the way from Boston to West Point, New York, picked us up, brought us back. I spent one night at home shivering. I finally went to the ER the next day, 104.3 degree fever.
Leo, not good.
I had a tick-borne illness called babesiosis is what it's called. And it attacks your red blood cells and it attacks your liver. And
what is it called again?
It's called babesia. And the longer term is babesiosis. And it's interesting how I learned about it. One of my students from MIT had asked me to write her a recommendation for a Rhodes Scholarship. And I said, I'm not able to do it. As I type this, I'm in a hospital bed right now. I have this thing called babesia. And she said, oh, no, you don't need to tell me about that. I know all about it. I saw that on Monsters Inside of Me on the National Geographic Channel. So of course, I went to Google.
I mean, it's not even funny, but it's.
Yeah, it was a pretty nasty, when I talked to the doctor and they treat it with antibiotics. And it took a couple of weeks to kill it. It was from a tick. And I never saw the tick. It's from a tick bite. They got me in the ER. They said, you either have Lyme disease or babesiosis. We need one more day of testing and we'll let you know. They said, nope, you have babesiosis. And they gave me this very expensive medication that was an antibiotic to kill it. And the doctor said to me, now you're not going to be yourself for like the next month. And I was saying to myself, yeah, BS, I'll be fine. Literally, I was dragging around for like the next month. And I don't weigh a lot, but I probably lost 25 pounds.
Oh, man.
My work pants were falling off of me. So it was a tough summer. We only got 110 of the 220 done miles. And then when I finally recovered, my friend Doug and I spent a good part of the winter knocking out the other half of the trail that we didn't. We would drive down throughout the winter, spot a couple of cars and knock out maybe 18 to 20 miles at a time to finish that. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Jeez, but I'll tell you what, I am very afraid of a tick more than anything else out on the trail anywhere, because a tick, as you just said, can do a lot of damage. Leo, wow.
I never saw the tick on me. I did find a tick in my tent one night, but it wasn't engorged and I just shoot them right out. I never saw a tick outside of that. I was wearing 100% DEET. And of course I was sweating it off because it was close to 100 degrees, but I was not hiking in long pants or a long shirt. It was 100. I was in shorts.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
Ticks are to be avoided. I didn't know that I got it, but that little sucker took me down like a big dog.
Jeez. Well, let's move to a brighter year, maybe. So we'll just name 2018 the year of the tick. Mm-hmm. And I can't even pronounce what you got, babesia or whatever it was. So we'll move to babesia. Yeah, we'll move to the southern version is babesia. So we'll move to 2019, where you actually hiked in the 100-mile wilderness, and completely opposite of the year of the tick, you said that this 100 miles was actually spectacular. So tell us about that section.
It was that was just last summer. And we started at the 100-mile wilderness, but we went SOBO and we went from Monson, Maine to Rangeley. And because we want to see, I think when we finish, and we will finish the AT, and we have a long way to go. We've hiked now from New Jersey all the way up into Maine, and we've got about 125 miles of Maine. But we went SOBO from Monson to Rangeley. And the weather was just fantastic. The White Mountains are in my backyard. I consider them my playground. I've hiked all over the White Mountains. I've peak bagged all the peaks, some of them 3-4 times. Had never hiked up in Maine before, though. The weather was fantastic. The mountain ranges were just spectacular. The hike was a grind, through the Bigelows and Avery and Sugarloaf and all those other peaks. We just had a
Yeah.
fantastic, it was
The
blueberry,
saddlebacks.
the saddlebacks, you name it. And then because I'm peak bagging the New England 67, and there's like 13 or 14 in Maine, and so many of them are along or near the AT. And so we're pretty rigid. We don't slack pack. However, a couple of times we slack pack to get off of the AT to go bag. Like Abraham was about 3 miles round trip, 4 miles round trip off the AT. So we went and bagged that so we wouldn't have to come back and do it. But it was just a fantastic summer, and we were meeting hikers. We were hiking with some Sobos that were just starting out, but the Nobos, they were closing in on the 100-mile wilderness. So they were within a week of completing the trail. They were very excited. So we got to engage with them.
Nice. Did you bag a peak up there? I'm trying to think right now. I know there's a peak not far from the Crockers. We have to go off trail a little bit when you get up there. Did you guys bag that one as well?
If it was a 4,000 footer and it was within 3 miles of the AT, we were going to bag that peak because, we're going to complete the New England 67. And, I have 2 left in Vermont, and I probably have 4 left in Maine, and I will have completed that. So yeah, I don't know exactly what peak I know that Abraham Spectacular reminded me of the rocky summit of Mount Adams.
Wow.
Mount Adams, it feels like you're sort of on Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably Abraham. It was, and I was Sobo, and it was just east of the AT. It was a fantastic peak. So yeah, there was one 4K that was very close, only probably 0.3 off the AT, but Abraham was a couple of miles, and we did it. We nailed it. It was a great summer because of weather, and just Maine is an underrated and spectacular state to hike in.
I agree. I totally agree with that. So
I also would like to say that, and I actually sent a note to I forget the name of the committee that maintains the trails, but that 120-mile section of trail we hiked on was spectacularly maintained. The signage was excellent. The blazes were freshly painted. It was just really in great condition.
Phenomenal. And that's actually Rangeley, right there where you cross Route 4. That's actually where I completed my first AT section hike right there. So we had a little celebration there in the parking lot. It was great. And then we went into Rangeley and celebrated. So I totally, Rangeley has a little piece of my heart.
Rangeley's a great town.
Yeah, it is. So 2016, we started with your buddy Doug. You guys had clipped off some of the 48,000 foot, or not 48,000, 4,000 peaks. And then 2017 was a great year. 2018, I'm going to call the year of the tick. 2019 was an awesome summer in Maine. And one thing we've learned is that you really appreciate the people on the trail and meeting and talking to people. And another thing you said to me is that the Appalachian Trail, it's a cathartic outlet for you. And I can kind of piece together now why. So do you want to expand on that a little bit for us?
I will a bit, and on behalf of veterans, again, this is the veteran in me. Sometimes as Americans, we completely take for granted what we have here in this country, our freedom, the beauty of our country, the ability to do what we want when we want. And I've deployed, and many of my brothers and sisters have as well. And we've seen impoverished people. We've seen deep-seated hatred. We've just seen people that have just the worst living conditions. And I've also spent time, out in the field and while deployed, where, up in the mountains with like a weapon in my hand that you don't know what's around the next corner, or driving through like downtown Mosul or something. And you just don't know where that surprise is going to come from. Just the utter freedom and just stepping back and taking a look at how beautiful everything is with, if you're a section hiker, there's no rules. It's up to you when you're going to stop, how far you're going to go. You have to plan your own hike. No one's telling you what to do. And you can just step back and take in the splendor and more deeply appreciate what we as Americans have. And I think it's maybe hard for those that haven't seen, we've seen and done things that other people have not done. And so we've done that on behalf of the nation. And so I just have a deep appreciation for that, and just being out in all that beauty and with all that challenge. I find it very cathartic, which is why it's part of what sets my soul on fire and wants me to go out. If you want to ask me what my favorite trail is, my answer is going to be the next one. And so that's what keeps me going.
I really like that. And speaking of the next one, thank you for all of that, by the way. In addition to hiking on the Appalachian Trail, spending time up in the New England states, you also have ventured out in other countries, and most recently in Arizona. I know you've spent some time in Colorado and Utah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your most recent trek in Arizona?
Yeah, so, life is short, so you got to get after it now. And so I've begun to spread my wings beyond just the area. I want to hike all over. And so I took a week just around the holidays. Hadn't been to Arizona before, and I had already done some winter hiking or some snow hiking here, but I wanted to experience the Arizona desert, and there's just so many spectacular hikes there. I just fell in. If you've never hiked in the Superstition mountain range of Arizona, you have to go hike there. It's mysterious. It's fantastic. There's just some very secluded trails, and there's some amazing high peaks there. And so I think I was there for 7 days and hiked like 5 or 6 straight days, multiple different peaks. And so for anyone that hasn't, or if you live in Arizona, good for you. Come our way during those hot summer months. But if you want to do some winter hiking that's in warm weather, I would recommend people check out Arizona. I love the Superstition mountain range. I'd also get up to Sedona, which of course is fantastic. It's just a beautiful place.
Yes, that's what I heard. I've been to Arizona a few times, but I've never actually hiked in Arizona, and that's sad now that I'm thinking about it. But yes, I definitely want to get back there. And what about Colorado or Utah? I mean, everybody knows those are gorgeous states to hike in. So just pick a hike for us that you would like people to know.
2017 was the fittest that I've ever been. Not only did I do the state of Vermont with my buddy, I also, the woman who picked us up in New York when I was sick, she was section hiking Sobo, and I think I did about 4 days on the trail with her from Manchester, Vermont, all the way down. I forget where I think to Bennington.
Okay.
But I owned a home in Colorado. We had tenants in, and so I flew out there to turn it over to new tenants. And on a whim, I just decided to hike to round trip Pikes Peak. And it was like a 25 mile hike, about 10 hours with about 7,800 feet of elevation gain. Bar Trail, though, is very different than the rugged peaks of the Northeast. It was just a smooth sort of smile by the mile peak. It got a little interesting over 11,000 feet, especially having just been at sea level a couple of days before. But I found Pikes Peak to be a spectacular hike. I hope to get back out and do some more 14ers in Colorado. And then Utah, I also spent some time there. And the canyons, Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood Canyon in the Salt Lake City area are to die for. They're just wonderful hiking areas. And then I spent a week at both Zion and Bryce, which I'm sure many of the listeners have probably been to. The Narrows at Zion are just a fantastic hike. And of course, there's some others as well. But
yeah, the Narrows, campsite number 7, was the best night of sleep I have ever had in my life. I have no idea why, but when we got there, I completely passed out, didn't hear a thing, and didn't wake up to the next morning. So that is the Narrows will always be known as my best, beyond the beauty of the Narrows. The best night of sleep in my life. So Leo, really appreciate it. Yes, and keep hiking, and you and I are going to keep in touch, and we're going to have you back on after a while because we got to keep up with you and figure out what's going on and see all the new stuff you're doing. And so now, not a problem. So I've had listeners reach out to me and say, hey, why don't you ask these particular questions? So I got a little segment called Questions Listeners Want to Know. And these are just like brief answers, maybe the first thing that comes to your mind. So the first question is, what is your one luxury item that you always carry with you?
I consider myself a subject matter expert at sleeping bags because I've lived outside for probably 4 years of my life, many in a sleeping bag. And so I refused to carry, of course, a heavy Army type sleeping bag. And so I sprung probably more money than I should have. And my Western Mountaineering Summerlight 32 degree sleeping bag, I have a love affair with it. It's light. Even in the summer, even when it's hot in the summer, I can just unzip it or just lay on top of it. And so I think that's my number one. I'm also a huge fan of Gossamer Gear, the company. And I have a Gossamer Gear Mariposa 60 pack, but those packs come with this little sit pad that sits in the small of your back, and you can pull that sit pad out and put it on top of a tent platform or on top of a wet rock. So I cheated. I have two, but those are them. Those are my two luxury items.
Hey, and if you carry it, I say bring it with you. All right. So the second one is like your favorite trail food, dinner, or snack.
I might not be of too much help to the other listeners out here because all I do, I carry a 650 milliliter pot and I only boil water in it. So I'm not really stirring up many recipes. Starbucks instant coffee is my go-to. A little bit too much paper residue, but in the morning I love that. But my favorite snack by far, and I get them at Trader Joe's, are peanut butter pretzels. They're pretzels with peanut butter in the middle. You don't have to worry about spreading the peanut butter. They're salty, they're sweet, you're getting some protein, they're light, they're a little bit bulky, but they're just fantastic. I recommend anybody try them.
And number 3, what is something you failed at and learned from while hiking?
I think I struggle with the same thing on almost every hike that I'm on. I'm an Army Ranger. I'm Ranger qualified, and you can take the soldier out of the Army, but you can't take the Army out of the soldier. And so, the Rangers have a thing called the Ranger Creed. It's 6 paragraphs, and each sentence starts with one of the letters in the word Ranger. And one of those paragraphs says, acknowledging that a Ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air. I accept the fact that as a Ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. I sometimes mistakenly apply that concept to hiking, which prevents me from stopping to smell the roses. Like I'll want to, it's like, okay, the day started. How many miles can I get in? I sometimes leave my trail buddy in the dust. He's like a mile or, an hour or so behind me, and I'll race off to the shelter. So I sometimes have to challenge myself and remember to step back, breathe it all in, smell the roses. It's about the destination, or it's about the journey, not the destination. So I think that's the mistake that I deal with often. Just stepping back and smelling the roses is what I'd say.
Nice. Now we've come to the point in the podcast where the guest is going to sign off for us by reading their own journal entry, statement, or quote that will inspire us to keep hiking section by section.
I don't have my own quote. I met along the way my first year a thru hiker. His trail name was 5 Star. And if you want to know why his trail name was 5 Star, he was an Uber driver and in his past life. And he told me, Leo, when I give people a ride, it's going to be a 5-star ride. And his name was Matthew Bosarge. He ended up completing the trail. I stayed in touch with him after the trail, after he finished and after I got off my section, which ended. That was the year we did Massachusetts. He sent me a really nice note afterwards with the standard picture of him at Katahdin, in the sort of the victory pose there. I didn't know the impact I had on him, when we had met, and I stayed in touch with him later. And I actually helped him. He was talking about entering the Air Force and entering service. He was worried about age waivers because he was an older guy. This is a guy that hiked in sandals and had one of those great big single trekking canes. He sent me a wonderful note, but I think that what he says here applies to other section hikers. He said, "Dear Leo, thank you for being such a great and encouraging 5-star guy. God really helped me in my journey by allowing me to meet you along the way. I have a feeling that you make a positive impact in the lives of many others as well. Your friend, Matthew." And so my message to the other section hikers out there is that any one of us can have an impact on there's this wonderful hiking community. Julie, you and I have talked about it. Even the smallest of interactions can have a positive impact on others, whether it be giving someone your water, helping with first aid needs, helping them deal with or listening to them while they're talking with you about some life crisis that led them out to the trail, staying connected with them later. I happened to stay connected with Matthew afterwards. I'd be out hiking in New Hampshire somewhere in the winter with my dog along the AT. I'd take pictures of the blazes of where I was, and I'd email them to him. We stayed in touch. I didn't know the impact I had on him. At the same time, he didn't know the impact he had on me, because he inspired me to continue on. I was a new section hiker. I was just grinding through Massachusetts. And I'm like, man, if this guy in the sandals has come all the way from Georgia to here, he's going to make it to Maine. The least I can do is get my butt through Massachusetts. And so he was inspiring me to continue on. But my message to the other listeners is that anyone can have a positive impact on, and I'm in the leadership development and mentoring business. Anyone can have a positive impact on anybody else.
Leo, I cannot thank you enough. First of all, again, thank you for your service to our country, and I cannot thank you enough for being on the podcast.
I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you well in your continued journeys as well, and hope to stay in touch with you. And I am in touch with you. I've listened to some other. I just listened to Philouette, and I've actually going to order a trail sign from him. He lives about 10 miles down the road. I'm going to go pick it up. And
that is awesome.
I also listened to what's her name, to Janet, Slow and Steady.
Slow and
I listened
Steady.
to her
Yeah.
podcast as well. So Julie, I think you're doing a wonderful service to the section hikers. I wish you well and hope we can stay in touch.
Thanks again, Leo. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Julie, last thing. We're all going to be dead for a long time, so we got to get out and get after it right now. Don't wait. Go out, and to the extent that you can, go out and get after it.
Thank you again, Leo, for being on the podcast and for your service. I am so thankful you reached out to me to be on the podcast, because you have a very powerful story that will resonate with a lot of our listeners. I hope that hiking continues to set your soul on fire. I think there's one thing we can all do together, and that's remember to stop and smell the roses. Next week, we have our first guest on the show that are section hiking the Ice Age Trail. They are proud yellow blazers and call themselves 1,000 milers. And they share some unique modes of transportation to get their section hiking done. This episode of the Jester Section Hiker is dedicated to all of our veterans, active military, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. Thanks again for listening, and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets in these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.